We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello, listeners. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 76, Long Before We Met. This first aired on November 19th, 1981. The IMDb synopsis is, Mork fantasizes about competing for Mindy in high school, which is sort of true, but leaves a lot out. It was the third episode in a row directed by Frank Buxton, and it was the third for the writing team of Deborah Resnick and John B. Collins. There's a nighttime exterior of the house with snow on the ground. Mindy in voiceover says, "Don't worry, Mirth. Daddy and I won't be home too late." Mirth says that they're deserting him. The doorbell rings. Mindy is in a gorgeous dress. I didn't know if it was brocade, but it's just got this floral pattern with pinks and blues. It's got a long skirt and puffy sleeves, and it's just really flattering to her. Oh, there's also some fake jewels, and I realize as I'm describing it, it sounds really tacky, but it just appeals to me. And she's also wearing brown boots. Mirth is in his usual overalls. Mindy knows that it's Grandma at the door. And I'll just mention right now, she is technically Mirth's great-grandmother, but nobody says that. Mindy says Mirth is going to have so much fun with her. He says, no, they're not. All Grandma does is want to play canasta. And there's this thing in this episode where Cora is like a traditional grandmother, but then they'll throw in the things about her being a modern grandmother. Mirth says he's going to hide. As he goes upstairs, she says, okay, you hide on Grandma. She opens the door to Cora, and they greet each other, Cora calling her dear. The audience applauds. Cora has a blue coat over her arm, and she's carrying a shopping bag, and she's wearing one of her usual outfits, dressed with a bow at the top. Mindy thanks her for skipping yoga class. That's what I meant about her being modern. Cora calls her dear and says it's her pleasure. There's a close-up of Mindy's outfit as Cora says, wow, that dress is a knockout. Mindy giggles and says thanks. Cora thinks Mindy is going to be the hit of her high school reunion. I will address the age thing shortly, as you know. This is the kind of thing that I will be nitpicking. Mindy says she hopes so. As she takes Cora's coat, she says, to tell you the truth, I'm a little nervous. She hangs up the coat and says she hasn't really kept up with anybody but Glenda Faye. So yes, this is the episode where Glenda Faye comes back once in season 4. It seems really weird that Mindy hasn't kept up with anybody from high school, because in the first season in particular, we kept hearing about her high school friends. Mindy doesn't know if she'll have anything in common with anybody.
No, I suppose that may be true, yes. You're married to a spaceman. You have a full-grown son. No, I don't think you'll have anything in common.
This is not only a nice summary of Mindy's family situation, but it also shows Cora's dry humor and acceptance. We did not see them tell Cora on screen about her great-grandson, but I think it is in character that she is cooler about it than Fred was initially, because she just tends to be a more kind of roll with the punches, take things as they come kind of person. Mindy laughs and says she's dying to find out what happened to everybody. Cora asks where her little Mirth is. And of course, Jonathan Winters is much larger than Elizabeth Kerr, but he is her little grandbaby. Mindy says she doesn't know, but she points up to the attic, and the previous episode had established that that's where Mirth's bedroom is. Cora steps back up closer to the stairs. She says she's sorry that Mirth isn't here. It's too bad because she brought a special treat for him. From the attic, we can hear Mirth say, a special treat? As Mirth descends the stairs, Cora says she's brought him a great big delicious mouth-watering salad. His excitement changes to disappointment and disgust. There's a cut to Mindy looking dubious. Just mention right now, there's a lot in this episode of reaction shots. Mirth says, oh no, salads are for bunnies. She says that she was only kidding, and she brought him a whole ton of brownies. She takes a plastic bag out of the shopping bag. He's excited again. There's a cut to Mindy looking happy for him, but kind of in an exaggerated way, like sometimes when she's interacting with Mirth or around him, she'll exaggerate her emotions. As Cora goes in the kitchen and Mirth heads over to a bar Barstool. He says, "Now that I think about it, I guess you're just about my favorite babysitter. Then when I really think about it, you're the only babysitter I've ever known." So in case you're curious, Fred, and for that matter Exodore, have never babysat him. Mork enters in the bedroom in black slacks and his red bow tie, and we can see a bit of the white collars of his shirt. So it's mostly like how he dresses when he's semi-formal, but he has put on a yellow 1930s style cheerleader sweater. Not necessarily something that a female cheerleader would have worn, but maybe what a male cheerleader would have worn. The applause includes cheers, and then we get his cheerleader cheer.
Our team is red hot. Your team ain't doodly squat. Kick him like a horse, kick him like a donkey. Come on now, let's beat those honkies.
Even though he looks like he stepped out of a 1930s Rudy Valley college movie, he does his cheer as a modern black man, including saying the word honkies. The others are amused, Mindy especially. Mindy asks where he found her old cheerleading sweater. I refuse to believe that this is Mindy's old cheerleading sweater, even though we will see that it has her name on it. It looks like at the latest something from the 50s. I don't believe that they would necessarily have the same size in sweaters, but this is their direction they're going, and maybe Mindy's high school was very old-fashioned. Certainly this is a very different look to when Mork joined the Pony Express. Mork says that she hid it, and he also says that last night she was trying it on when she thought he was asleep. He says she was like this.
I didn't do that.
Oh, you sure did.
I did not.
Oh, yes, you did. No way, no way, no way, no way.
If you're going to go, you better shake a leg.
Oh, you're right, Rams.
Murph, now we want you to be a good boy and you mind Grandma, okay?
I will, but you have to promise me that I can dye Grandma's hair.
No.
I want to dye her hair.
No, Murph, that's what we're talking about. Now you be a good boy, and we'll call later to make sure everything's all right.
Okay. We'll be here.
Okay.
Now, don't worry about a thing, dear, and have lots of fun. Just go for it.
Oh, thank you, Graham. We'll do everything that you used to do in high school. We'll forge hall passes, we'll TP the hallways, we'll abuse substitute teachers.
I never did stuff like that in high school.
Oh, in that case, we'll just date the entire football team.
All right, be a good boy.
I will.
If you can't be good, be reasonable. And Daddy loves you.
Oh!
Although this clip is not super important to either the plot or the humor of the episode, I'm including it because it shows that at this point their fighting and teasing is very light and playful, and it's a contrast to how they interact later. Even when he talks about her dating the whole football team, he doesn't act jealous. He's just teasing her that she was popular in high school. And I'll mention that there continues to be this duality to Mindy, that sometimes we're told she was a big nerd in high school. There were episodes where Glenda Faye was the popular one in high school, but then at the same time we're told that Mindy was super popular and she was a cheerleader. This episode doesn't really resolve that, but there are hints that she was popular, but she had this other side underneath that she didn't really get to express. When Mork does the leg shaking and then pivots, it's just a very Robin Williams kind of set of movements. We get to see here some of their co-parenting, how she is more the rule setter and he is the one who is more able to express affection. They are continuing to be Daddy Mork and Mommy Mindy. So even though in a way we've gone back to traditional gender roles, there is still playing with it. And I like that although she is not a father, she does some of the things that are more associated with the male parent. The same for him being a dad who can tell his son that he loves him. We don't know what color Mirth wants to dye Grandma's hair, but it sounds like something he's wanted to do for a while. That's it for Cora in this episode. It was good to see Elizabeth Kerr again. It would have been nice to see her interact with Mirth a little bit, but we got a sense of what their relationship is. And it is implied that they're fond of each other and that she will do a good job of babysitting. I had wondered recently what they would do about childcare if and when Mork gets a more permanent job outside the home, and so this sort of answers that. As far as I know, Cora is not working anymore ever since the music store shut down. There's a nighttime exterior, without snow incidentally, of a white building that has kind of a half wall that's of glass. This is obviously supposed to be a gymnasium. I don't even know if it's in Colorado. It just may have been a stock shot that they had. The subtitles say that easy listening music is playing, although it's a little bit funkier than that. The school colors seem to be green and yellow based on the decorations. There's a banner that says, Class of 71, today is the first day of the rest of your life. And we can see bleachers and an electronic scoreboard. There's a blurry list of Class of 71 alumni. Might have been 40 names or 2 columns, and look like about 20 in the first column, and the second column's a little bit obscured. And there are pictures of different groups like thespians and the chess club, but individuals rather than group shots. I'm going to bring this up now, and then we'll get into it more later. In the first season, Mindy was 21. If she graduated in 71 and they're having the class reunion fairly late in the year, she's got to be 28. Only 3 years and a few months have passed, maybe 3.5. It would have made more sense to me if it had been her 5th year reunion. They could have just said that she was 23. I think there are reasons why they aged her up and why they chose 1971 rather than 76. But yes, it did bug me even as a 13-year-old. That was without the show having been in syndication yet, I think. But it was just like, wait a minute, how is Mindy this old? But yes, I will come back to that as it impacts later parts of the episode. There's a man with brown loafers, black slacks, a striped gray jacket, a blue-colored shirt, and a blue bow tie, and he stands near the entrance by the name tag table. My note is, he is very obviously Pee-wee effing Herman, because yes, this is the episode where we get to see Paul Reubens. In fact, we will see Paul Reubens in 1971, quote-unquote, clothing. He was then 29. He died in 2023, as you may recall. At this point, he'd already done the Pee Wee Herman TV movie, but in the early 80s, he was doing various roles as some flavor of nerd, not necessarily Pee Wee-esque. This is listed as a special guest appearance by. I don't remember, but I guess he had enough fame that they could give him that extra credit. I don't know if he was good friends with Robin Williams. They certainly act like it. It seems like they would have known of each other even if they didn't know each other. His first role was uncredited in a movie called The Brotherhood in 1968. His last role was in 2023. Paul Reubens looks pretty much like he would as Pee-wee, but not the same wardrobe, of course. And he is doing the Pee-wee mannerisms and voice, and I suspect catchphrases. If this episode didn't have anything else going for it, that would be interesting in itself. Mork and Mindy enter holding hands. He's pretty much wearing what he was wearing before, except for the cheerleading sweater, and he's got his usual black jacket for semi-formal occasions. The man by the name tag table says, "Oh, I know you," as he points at Mindy. She points back. He says her name and that he'd recognize her anywhere. Mork asks as an aside if this is one of Mindy's old boyfriends. Already at this point, Mork knows that he's going to probably run into guys that Mindy dated in high school and had that joke about the football team, and he's known Mindy for over 3 years, so he knows somewhat of her high school years. She says no and introduces Mork to Dickie Nimitz. Dickie laughs as he shakes hands with Mork. Because Mindy introduced Mork as her husband, Dickie says, "Gosh, you married Mindy? She wouldn't even go to the library with me." Mork says that she wouldn't go with him unless he married her first. And there's a weird thing in this episode about a library being a euphemism for sex, I think. I'm not making this up, it's a theme. They all laugh. Dickie says he couldn't make that kind of commitment, like that was the only thing keeping them from getting together. He hands them their badges, although they're actually just name tags, stickers, and he jokes to not get their names mixed up. He laughs.
Well, now that we're such great pals, we should start hanging out together again. How about the library tomorrow?
Oh, sure, we'd love to.
But we can't. My library card expired. See you later, Dickie.
Yeah, excuse me for letting.
Oh, here they are, Mr. and Mrs. Snugglepuss.
It means you said there wouldn't be a natural blonde here.
Oh, you're such a little pudding face. Can you believe we're here? Isn't this weird? This should be like we should be putting on our gym suits and playing a game of dodgeball. God, 10 years and nothing's changed.
Oh, Mindy! Mindy
Who are you?
Mork. Mindy's better half. The yin for her yang. Whoa, smuggling basketballs, Mrs. Boyd?
Yeah, this is my husband. And you're, pregnant! You're sticking him in... Yeah, we used to have so much fun in the library together. Who was that?
Althea Blyleven.
We see in this clip both the friendliness and the bitterness are very Pee-wee, including the line, "Excuse me for living." And again, he mentions the library. Glenda Faye is in a very Glenda Faye outfit. It's a red pantsuit that's somehow both loose and tight. She calls Mork and Mindy Mr. and Mrs. Snugglepuss because she always had these annoying nicknames, but it's kind of cute. I guess she didn't go to the wedding for whatever reason. Maybe she's moved away and has come back for the reunion, but she is happy that they got married. She hugs Mindy, but not Mork, which I thought was interesting because they used to be pretty good friends. He remarks that Glenda is a natural blonde, and she calls him Little Pudding Face, so another of her annoying nicknames. The two women can't believe they're back in the gym. Mindy says she feels like they should put on their gym suits and play a game of dodgeball. Mindy says 10 years and nothing's changed. I would have thought that the electronic scoreboard had changed, but apparently that was there 10 years ago, as we will see. Mork says that he is the yin, should be yin, to Mindy's yang, so that they balance each other out. He says, "Smuggling basketballs, Mrs. Boyce," and I didn't get that. Maybe it's a reference to some athlete named Boyce. And we find out that this very pregnant woman used to go to the library with Dickie. She turns out to be Althea Flylee. This character, who we don't really see again, is played by Marilyn Kagan. She was in 30. She died in 2020. She had only a few other roles, from Fox's in 1980 to playing one of Ellen's many therapists on the show Ellen in 1996. I think she's just basically here to show that time has passed and Mindy's not the only one who's become a parent. Also, that Mindy apparently didn't know everybody in her probably very small high school class. Glenda does remember Althea, and she says that she played the lute in the marching band. Mindy still doesn't remember her. Mindy guesses some things have changed. She says Glenda Faye hasn't changed, and she asks if she herself has. Glenda says Mindy doesn't wear that headband quite as much anymore. They laugh again. Glenda gasps, and then there's a cut to a guy with longish, wavy blonde hair, big glasses, and a three-piece suit. He's just coming in. The way I'm describing him, he sounds kind of nerdy, but this is supposed to be early 80s yuppie look, I think. He's not a nerd like Dickie, who's not wearing glasses. Glenda asks Mork, how about some punch? He says no thanks, he's hypoglycemic. She meant her. He's not sure she's going to like it. Someone dumped a bunch of fruit in there, because he doesn't realize it's a fruit punch. He also says it's kind of brown, but he goes to get it. Glenda excitedly tells Mindy that he's here. Mindy doesn't know who she's talking about. Glenda tells her not to play it cool. It's Steve Sanders. Mindy gasps. Glenda thinks Mindy should go talk to him. She thinks Mindy is dying too. Mindy wore Steve's ID bracelet for 2 years. Now, I have forgotten the details, but there was that boyfriend in season 1 who was not Steve Sanders, since we saw him, and I was under the impression that they dated in high school. Possibly it was right after high school, but in case, she was engaged to that guy. When did she have time? Maybe that's another reason it's been 10 years rather than 5 or 6. As Steve comes over, Mindy says she hasn't seen him in 10 years. She wouldn't know what to say. She turns and sees him standing there. Laughing nervously, she says, "Hi, Steve." He points at her and says, 33 left, 16 right, 7 left. Glenda looks like she's having a religious experience. As Mindy says, "Pardon me?" Steve says that's Mindy's old locker combination. Mindy says, "Oh my gosh." Glenda says, "Oh my God, he remembers your locker combo. How romantic." She clasps her hands. So Glenda is a lot more excited about this than Mindy is, but Mindy seems pleased to see Steve. It's a little bit awkward, but she has been curious what everybody's been up to. And this is a guy that she dated for 2 years. And it's been 10 years since she saw him. Mark comes over with red punch, it's not brown, and says, "If that really makes your toes tingle, this'll really knock your socks off." He starts to recite their zip code. It's 80, and then he says, "Oh darn, I had it." So he didn't overhear the whole conversation, but he did hear that Glenda was impressed that Steve knew Mindy's high school locker combination. Boulder has various zip codes, but they do all start out 80, and then there's a 3, and I assume that was the same back in the early 80s. Mindy laughs and takes Mork's hand, leading him over to introduce him to Steve. Mork says, for sure, totally. And then he gives Steve kind of a hip handshake. Both men chuckle. Steve thinks that he's seen Mork somewhere before. He wonders if Mork went to Fairview, which presumably is their high school rival. Mork says he went to Chester A, and then he does that sort of chipmunk cheek tweaking sound, school for boys. So it sounds like it's going to be Chester A. Arthur, like the president, but apparently this is his school back on Ork, probably where he met those clones 1, 2, 6, and 7, I think it was. Glenda Faye laughs, because she still finds Mork amusing. Then Glenda sees Tommy Perozzi. He had bad skin and a great car. Mindy laughs as Glenda heads off screen. Steve takes Mindy's left hand and says, so, Mindy, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years. She says, I know. He asks her to tell him everything. She says, well, she got married. They both laugh. And I'll note right now that Mindy does not mention that she has a little boy at home. Mork takes her other hand, and then with his free hand, he points at her wedding ring and says, wing, which I think is a funny way to say wedding ring. They all laugh. Mindy swings both their hands as she says she went into journalism. In fact, she's working at KTNS. She does the news sometimes, but mostly she just assists the manager, stuff like that. A bit more of a description of what is still, months later, a rather vague job. Steve says he's still single, and right now he's Lieutenant Governor of Wyoming. And he does say it in a not boastful way, but he did manage to slip that into the conversation. She says, wow, and Mork salutes him because he said lieutenant. Mork didn't even know Wyoming had an army. Amusingly, Wyoming is one of 5 states that does not have a lieutenant governor, and I wonder if the writers did that deliberately or if they just picked Wyoming because it's close to Colorado. It did seem strange to me that Mindy, being as well informed as she is, didn't know this. I have to wonder also, did Steve count on people not knowing that? And so he's just showing up to his reunion lying, just bluffing his way through. None of them are holding hands anymore, and Mindy is now standing next to Steve. He puts his arm on her shoulder and asks Mork if he minds if Steve and Mindy have a dance for old time's sake. Mork says, oh no, take my wife, please. And he puts his hand to his side and grins like he's doing a kind of young man, old school comedy joke. Mindy says, okay, see you. As Steve and Mindy start to dance, Mork says to have her back by 2, meaning 2 a.m. He chuckles, and she waves from Steve's arms. Because even though it's not a slow dance, they're not holding each other tight, they are definitely touch dancing. Dickie is now standing in the bleachers. He calls to Mork, who joins him. They sit.
Steve and Mindy together again. It's like the senior prom. Up, there they go! Smooch, smooch, smooch! That's all he ever did in school. Once I caught him necking behind the library. Steve beat me up, but I respected him for it. I was a creep in those days.
Time sure does fly, doesn't it?
Yeah. Aren't you even jealous? How can you just sit here and watch your marriage dissolve?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I trust Mindy farther than I can throw her. I mean, I don't have a jealous bone in my body. But I'm willing to rent one.
We can see here the immediate chemistry between Robin Williams and Paul Reubens, just the way they play off each other comedically. It's a really nice mesh, and I'm glad that we have as much as we do in an episode that really isn't about that. We can see that Steve is kissing Mindy on the forehead, and Dickie calls these smooches. It definitely seems to be crossing a line. I mean, it's not like he's grabbing her butt, but it's an odd thing to do to a married ex that you haven't seen in 10 years at your high school reunion. Mork is trying not to be jealous, and Dickie is escalating this. Eventually, he does get to him. He points out that Steve and Mindy danced together at the senior prom, so it must have been the last 2 years of high school. And again, the library. Dickie saw Steve and Mindy necking behind the library, which I think for Mindy is going pretty far, but you know, she did date him 2 years, so. With a bit of self-awareness, Dickie says that he was a creep in those days. Mork says that time has flown, and Dickie gives him that look like, are you insulting me? But he kind of lets it go. But he also is just continuing to shake Mork's confidence and says that Mork is watching his marriage dissolve. Eventually, Mork says he doesn't have a jealous bone in his body, but he's willing to rent one, which is not a great line. Then there's a daytime exterior of the house, yes, with snow on the ground. Mirth is in a plaid bathrobe over his blue pajamas. He's sitting at the dining table. He has 3 cereal boxes lying flat. He has a little toy car, and he tells Evil that he'll get $50 million if he clears the 3 boxes. That's, of course, a reference to Evel Knievel, who was not as popular in 81 as he would have been in the mid-70s, but maybe Mirth heard about him from Mork, or he watches a lot of TV himself. Mirth does the sound of more like a motorcycle than a car zooming, and then he has the car jump over the boxes, and he does a dialogue with himself about how he hopes Evil makes it. The car lands, and he says that Evil did make it. The applause includes whistles and cheers. And yes, I suppose if I thought Jonathan Winters was funny, I would have included that clip. It was just kind of, it's there. It's fine. Didn't make me laugh. He didn't annoy me like in the previous 2 episodes, so that was good. And Glenda Faye, by the way, does not annoy me as much. I realize that's not very high praise, that I'm not finding the episode as annoying as it could be. I do have some faint criticism, but we'll get to that. Mork and Mindy enter from the bedroom. He's in his usual red and white sleepwear, but she's got her hair pinned up and she's obviously dressed for work. I really like her outfits in this episode. This one has an orange blouse with a brown belt, maybe leather, and she's wearing a floral skirt that has brown and orange and purple, but honestly it works. And she's also wearing brown boots again. She asks how long Mork is going to keep this up. There's a cut to Mirth looking worried. She says it's silly. Mork says last night he saw a side of her he rarely ever sees. She asks what side. He says her back. They cross the room and she grips the top of a dining chair with one hand while she puts her other hand on her hip. He says her front was too busy talking to Steve. Mirth asks, Mommy, are you and Daddy fighting? Mork says yes, but Mindy says no. She calls Mirth sweetie and says she and his dad are just having a little disagreement. We really love each other very much. So she doesn't want their child to worry about these disagreements. That is something that is a factor now. It used to be that Mork and Mindy would argue and most of the time there was no audience. Now they've got their son who is observing what's happening between them. Mork says, yes, your mom and I love each other very, very much, but that's why we have to be alone for a moment right now. Although he's jealous, this is somewhat mature of him to realize that this is not an argument to have in front of their child, although they could have just finished the argument in the bedroom. Mindy is gathering up the cereal boxes. Mork tells Mirth to go in the bedroom, meaning the master bedroom, to play with the invisible dog that Uncle Exidor got him. Exidor is not in this episode, but this was a nice little shout out to him. It does seem like something Exidor would do as the godfather. Wait, is he also godfather? Orson's a godfather, right? Okay, whatever. But he's a friend of the family. And of course, if he's going to give the child a dog, it will be an invisible, probably non-existent one. Technically, Exidor is Grandpa Exidor because he adopted Mork. But again, we continue to ignore that on the series. Mirth gets up and says he just can't believe it. He tells Pablo to come on and let's go. Just as many of Exidor's followers have male Spanish names, the dog is named Pablo. We can see that Mirth is wearing slippers that look like Ernie from Sesame Street, so that's very cute. He tells Pablo they're going to the bedroom now. Then he tells Pablo to drop something that's been dead for days. So the invisible dog is eating something invisible and dead. The audience laughs and claps. After Mirth is gone, Mindy looks at Mork. She's now standing by the counter with one hand on it while her other hand is on her hip. Mork's hands are clasped. He says, you probably just think I'm overreacting, don't you? She says yes. He calls himself a silly orkin, venting his jealousy. She says that pretty well sums it up. As she takes the cereal bowl into the kitchen, she says, you're upsetting yourself with something I told you was over 10 years ago. So we didn't see the beginning of their argument, which probably started after they left the reunion or maybe even at the reunion. But she is trying to make it clear to him she broke up with Steve or he broke up with her 10 years ago and it is over. She says she really thinks she deserves a little more of Mork's trust than that. She goes back to him. He says, yeah, I guess I have been kind of foolish. So we could wrap up the episode right there, but of course we're not going to. He says, yeah, come to think of it, I don't even know what's his name? They chuckle. She says, oh, Stevie. He emphasizes the last syllable because Stevie sounds more intimate than Steve. He says, oh, the pain, the anguish, the solitude. So not exactly the stage directions thing, but certainly verbalizing his emotions. She rolls her eyes, then puts her hands on her hips. He walks away from her and says now he knows how the other two Supremes felt. It's a reference to Diana Ross leaving the Supremes. And yes, he has referred to the Supremes before. In a falsetto, he sings, "Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no river." I was thinking of the version by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, but apparently Diana Ross did cover "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." She walks over and covers his mouth. I think it's not to silence the discussion, but just to get him to stop singing. Then she puts one hand on his shoulder and the other on his arm. She tells him to listen to her. He looks at her hands on him as if he's surprised that they're there. She says the only reason there was ever a Steve in her life was because she hadn't met Mork yet. She asks if he understands, and he says no. She says, okay, be that way. She walks away. She says, I really don't have time for this. I've got to get to work. She grabs a brown folder. She calls towards the master bedroom. Bye, Mirth. Mommy has to go to work. She grabs her gray coat. She tells Mork, see you later. Then she frowns and exits. So on the one hand, yes, they should probably hash this out, but on the other, she is late for work and it's just not a good time to talk about this. Mork looks sad. Mirth comes out of the master bedroom and asks, Daddy, who won? He's kind of excited that there was this argument. Mork says they both did. You see, they had a little problem there, but now everything is just tutti frutti instead of hunky-dory, I guess. The doorbell rings. Mork answers. A young blonde delivery woman in jeans and a green jacket is holding a long box with a red bow on it. Her jacket says FTB, we deliver, instead of FTD. I guess they were worried about the florist company suing them. Mork takes the box and says thank you very much, and here's your tip. The tip is to never eat Mexican food and stand next to a flame. The woman rolls her eyes and exits. Just like Mindy. She's had enough and she's just gonna walk away. There's laughter, applause, and whistles. Mirth looks amused. The messenger, as she's credited, was played by Laura Lee Carlson. This was the first of a few minor TV roles through 1998, and sometimes she would play a reporter. Mork shuts the door. He goes over to Mirth. He takes off the bow and opens the box so they can both look inside. Mirth thinks that it's neat that Mork bought flowers for Mommy, but Mork didn't. Mirth holds the box as Mork reads the card. Mindy, it was wonderful seeing you last night. Let's not wait another 10 years. Love, Stevie. Mirth wonders, who's Stevie? Mork says he's the Lieutenant Governor of Wyoming and your future stepfather. Mork tosses the card into the air and miserably goes over the couch. It does feel inappropriate for Stevie to send what we will find out are red roses to his married ex-girlfriend, but it's not necessarily something that Mork needs to upset himself about. Obviously, Mindy is not having an affair with Stevie. She just danced with him, and at most, maybe they mildly flirted, and probably more so on Steve's side than Mindy's. We see here this thing of how Mork will often just give up too easily. Not only is he jealous of Steve, but he is imagining Mindy divorcing him and marrying Steve. Mirth says, is that right? Well, Pablo better saddle up.
We're on our way to cattle country.
Mirth looks like he's actually looking forward to having Steve as his stepfather, and we do know that he is impressed by politicians because he wanted Governor Lamb, who really did exist, autograph in the previous episode. And I like how the Western music motif is incorporated into the going to commercial music, and we can see Mork's misery here. Next time on Becoming Human.
Mommy loves you, Daddy.
I know that, but the problem is that Mommy loved someone else before she loved me. I wonder if she would have loved me then. Well, I've got two choices. I can either stand here and talk to myself like a soap opera, or go back in time and really find out. That's it.
You'd think by now I'd at least have gotten a pity day. Just only got eyes for that nerve. Steve!
I don't care what you say. I am going to marry her.
Dream on.
Boy, she's got a Jiffy Pop hairdo, too.